Are we witnessing a global intifada?
Intifada revolution! Intifada revolution!
The same global intifada, the same uprising, which we have heard preached across the globe for the last 14 months by terror sympathisers who want the West to fall.
When I think about the USA, it should burn! Death to America! Death to America!
What do you think about the burning the American flag?
I love it. Burn it down. Burn it again and again and again.
Such a system does not deserve to exist on God's earth.
Overnight, at least 15 people were mowed down at high speed by a man who drove his truck into crowds in New Orleans. He has been identified as Shamsuddin Jabbar. The FBI says he was inspired by Islamic State and was, quote, hell-bent on carnage.
It was very intentional behavior. This man was trying to run over as many people as he possibly could. This perpetrator who went around our barricades in order to conduct this, he was hell-bent on creating the carnage and the damage that he did.
The FBI says Shamsuddin Jabbar was a recent convert to Islam. Let's be clear, the West is not next. Terror is happening in the West now.
One day we can have a Muslim majority nation here in Canada, right in your face.
We have Canadian law here, and you say that you want Sharia law to displace Canadian law. That doesn't sound very respectful.
In majority, you wouldn't have any other option. Owe our allegiance and our loyalty first and foremost to our religion, not to the Queen, to be honest. When I went for my so-called oath, I was silent, I didn't say anything. It was your responsibility to make sure you got it out of me.
Western countries have done this to themselves by refusing to call out extremism and refusing to shut down the hate and threats spewed on our streets by terror sympathisers.
Intifada revolution! Intifada revolution!
The warning signs have been there for a long time, but they have been ignored. This was entirely predictable. Since October 7, pro-Palestine protesters have taken over the streets. They excused and tried to justify and slaughter of innocent Jews. In places like Europe and the US, it has been even more menacing and intimidating. Flags of terror groups have been waved so brazenly in the streets. Here at home in Australia, we saw the ugly scenes on the steps of the Sydney Opera House. And there are hate preachers who walk among us who openly and publicly celebrated the massacre. On college campuses in the US, American flags were burned. They wanted an uprising. They called for resistance and, again, a global intifada.
Intifada revolution! Long live Intifada!
Over at Harvard University, they wanted intifada in their own backyard.
Intifada coming to America! Intifada coming to America!
Intifada isn't just some fun throwaway phrase between classmates at universities. It's a rallying call for terror. Intifada, Arabic for uprising, is associated with the Second Intifada, a period of terror attacks in Israel in the early 2000s marked by suicide bombings. And the rallying call, the rallying cry, has been ignored by leaders across the world. When these radicals tell you what they want, believe them.
If it's really a sectarian problem between Catholics and Protestants, I have a solution for the people of Northern Ireland. They can all become Muslim, and they can solve the issue in that manner. This is one way they can solve the issue without any bloodshed, without any bloodshed, without any bloodshed, without any bloodshed.
Here we are with an ISIS-inspired terror attack in New Orleans. And hours before the attack, he posted videos on social media that indicated he was inspired by ISIS. He was a terrorist sympathiser. Wake up, America. And wake up the world. This is what a global intifada looks like.
And let me say this in English so you can understand what I'm saying.
I have translation.
No, I know you have translation, but I just want to make sure you get it right. There will come a day that we will see far more radical extremists and terrorists coming out of Europe because of lack of decision-making, trying to be politically correct, or assuming that they know the Middle East and they know Islam and they know the others far better than we do. And I'm sorry, but that's pure ignorance.
And if you want more proof, hours later, after the New Orleans terror attack, pro-Palestine supporters took over downtown Manhattan. Can you guess what they called for? A global intifada. They chanted, "Resistance is glorious. We will be victorious. We will honour all our martyrs. Gaza, you make us proud. And there is only one solution: intifada revolution." So not for peace, certainly not anti-war, but for death and violence. And this is what Israel is up against. It's the only country fighting against it, and at the same time being persecuted by Western leaders for fighting a battle against terror, not only for itself, but for the world. Islamic terrorists have been focused on Israel since October 7, but they haven't forgotten the West. But the West has forgotten about them because of a lack of moral clarity. And let's cut to the chase. When will the West actually call out the problem?
Allahu Akbar, Hamas! Allahu Akbar, Hamas! I got you on the highway. Yeah. Allahu Akbar, Hamas!
It has become a huge issue around the world, and leaders have no courage or no moral clarity to do anything about it. How many more thoughts and prayers will it take? No more tiptoeing around this issue for fear of being called racist or Islamophobic. It's not. And we can't sit around and pretend there are people who walk among us who hate this country, hate the country they live in, or the country in which they were welcomed into with open arms to spew their ideology. Now, I'm not saying everyone is a bad apple, but how many more innocent lives are we willing to sacrifice? The security bollards that line Bourbon Street, where the attack happened overnight, were being replaced at the same time. But what bothers me is, why do we have bollards everywhere on roads around the world?
Yes, exactly.
What are authorities protecting us from? From cars mowing down people in the name of extremism?
Hi, this is Shamika here, editing the video. I just have to add a few things. First, as of YouTube policies, I have to make it clear that I am not promoting anything that's seen in these protest clips. This is not a promotional or recruiting video in any sort. This is actually condemning what I see in what you see in the protest clips. Second, I also want to make it clear that the majority of Muslims, people who practice Islam, are peaceful. Okay? These are radical. These are people who take things to the extreme, mainly because the books that they worship kind of permit them to do that. But that's all religions. Most religious books, if taken literally, promote some sort of violence. But most people who actually practice that religion are mostly peaceful. So to say that. The second thing I want to say is what she said about the barricades. The fact that there has to be barriers up in the first place, we're not allowed to have a conversation about that, is a problem. It's the same thing that no one wants to talk about the fact that Israel has to live under an iron dome because they're constantly being sprayed with rockets and bombs. But they're the ones who are the problem. Just saying, not supporting everything Israel does or says, but the fact that you have to live under a shield because you're in a constant threat of being slaughtered is for some reason not a conversation anybody's having and makes them the baddies. That's the second thing. And the third thing, or the fourth thing I want to say before allowing the rest of this clip to play, or this video to play if you're still there, is then I find it very, very, very strange that most Republican, conservative, traditional, pro-America talking heads refuse to talk about this. Have not heard most of them even touch on this, especially people like Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. Candace Owens believes for the most part Jews in Israel is the problem, being that, which is strange, being that I don't see any Jewish people recruiting people in universities or calling for death or revolution or violence of any sort. And this is apart from the actual Israeli army that's going on with the war against terrorists. But I just find that strange. It's not just Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. It's most so-called pro-American conservative Republican traditionalist talking heads that really haven't touched this really rising, increasing problem we see going on in the West. That's it. Go back to the clip.
Again, why won't they name the threat? And get this, despite an ISIS flag being found in the truck, the FBI's first response was to assure America that it was not an act of terror.
This is not a terrorist event. What it is right now is their improvised explosive devices that was found, and we are working on confirming if it's a viable device or not.
15 people now confirmed dead, with dozens more injured. The killer, a U.S. Army veteran who had posted to social media that he was inspired by the Islamic State and wanted to.
A U.S. Army veteran with an ISIS flag on his vehicle swerved around makeshift barriers just hours into the new year.
This is not a terrorist event.
What a bunch of fucking bullshit.
A bloke just goes around with an ISIS flag and a couple of improvised explosive devices, but no, it can't possibly be terror. The ISIS flag means absolutely nothing. When will they name the threat that exists? And I will say this, we should acknowledge that the peaceful majority of Muslims do live among us, and that is an important distinction. But we can't be blind to the radical pockets of faith, or the global intifada will run us. And right now, we are all sitting ducks.
Intifada revolution! Intifada revolution!